Hello and welcome to this very quick run through of a week or approximately 10 days in cybersecurity and cyber risk. I'm Peter Glock. Stick with me, we're going to go through this quite fast. So, first thing to talk about is changes in cyber law, and this is both European and in the US. And the first thing I want to bring up is the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act. Now, this is a framework being put together in the US that enables companies and organizations to share information around cybersecurity with each other while offering them some protection for that information. In other words, they don't get sued by each other for sharing the wrong thing. This is now no longer a draft paper, it's actually gone to the final version, so it's in place in the US. I look forward to the same being in place in the Europe fairly soon. Don't hold your breath on that though, because there are some other things going on in Europe, as especially my British colleagues will know about. Okay, so next thing to talk about is what's been happening in the Investigatory Powers Act. This is one that's been going through the UK Parliament, and there was a report from the Culture, Media and Sport Committee, which has had quite a lot of comment on it from the expert community. Basically, the consensus seems to be that good idea, the bad guys are out there, we need to do something. But there are some issues with the actual deployment of fines and other financial penalties for cybersecurity lapses. So we're going to have an ongoing debate about, well, what should the regulatory environment be? I think in the report in cybersecurity, cybersecurity was compared with smoke alarms. And that's not actually a great comparison, because just knowing a smoke alarm's there actually gives people a sense of security, whereas that's not the case in knowing that that hacking is going on. All right, next thing. Let's talk very quickly about Brexit, or the potential for Britain to exit the European Union. This isn't an overtly political blog, so let's not go into whether that's a good or a bad thing in its own right. But let's look at its impact on the regulatory environment for cybersecurity. Well, according to our friends at Beazley, and Beazley are one of the biggest insurers in this space, actually, whether we're in or out of Europe, there is going to be a significant increase in the amount of regulation on UK businesses. Just to do business in Europe, we'll have to still have the general data protection regulations applied to us, and service providers, if they want to operate across European boundaries, will have to look at network information security. So actually, Brexit it's a red herring in terms of what's going to happen in cyber law applying to UK businesses. All right, so that's the law side and some of what's happening in the regulatory side. Let's look at actually what's been happening in the world of cybersecurity itself. Well, there's a lot been going on in the world of Android again. Android can be a reasonably secure platform, but it takes a bit of work. The latest thing that's come along is the prevalence of apps that are actually available on the Google app or the Play Store, which contain malicious code which enables an attacker to take root control of your device. Basically, just be very careful about what you install. These apps may not be picked up by existing antivirus or malware scanners on devices, and you may need to make sure everything's up to date to get past the rooting of your devices by malicious apps. Next one then. There's been a lot of discussion about the security of the Internet of Things, and particularly in regards to things like the smart home and the connected car. Well, generally, and I'll say it from my perspective, the designers of the products that are building smart homes and connected cars are not thinking about cybersecurity first. So it's basically a disaster at the moment. There will be a significant number of hacks as people deploy this technology. There will be companies sued for not having secure infrastructure. Just watch this space and be very cautious about the security model for the Internet of Things. Next then, a report actually from a reasonably large consultancy about the way that large domains email systems are set up. Now, when you set an email server up, you can put in things like Sender Protection Framework or SPF. You can put in DMARC. There are other things that you can put in place. But, and here's the problem, The way those systems are set up at the moment is that for most sites or most domains, even if an email sent fails the lookup, it fails in a soft way. In other words, it'll put a little flag at the top of the email header, but it won't stop the email being sent through from that domain. So what you really have to do is, please don't trust email, even if it comes from a respected domain like the BBC or gov.uk if you're here in the UK. Don't actually assume that it's really come from the organisation that says it's sending it. So that's email spoofing. If you're interested, I use email spoofing in a number of the phishing attacks that I carry out for employee awareness, and I'll be talking a lot more about that on my website over the next few weeks. Next thing, you probably, if you listen to these, you probably know that I'm very much against the use of simple user IDs and passwords, and especially against reusing user IDs and passwords across multiple sites. Mark Zuckerberg got caught out of this recently, the guys at Twitter, and so on. A lot of high-profile stuff here. Well, the good news is that that there are now lots of two-factor authentication or two-step verification methods which use devices like your mobile phone as another step to authenticate. Now that's great, and actually I encourage everyone to turn on two-step verification for any site that they go to. PayPal, LinkedIn, Google Apps, all have got them. And in fact, today, or yesterday, in fact, from when I'm recording this, Google announced that their own employees will be using a simplified form of Google Authenticator, which enables them to use a separate device to tap a button to authenticate to access apps. The reason that's important is there has been a demonstration of what's called a man-in-the-middle attack on using an SMS or text message authentication. It's actually now possible to spoof the credentials of the person who the message is being sent to, and you can do a fairly effective man-in-the-middle attack. Again, there's some more details on the blog if you want to read into that. So, the other thing I need to say is that I went through setting up two-step verification for some of the accounts on our Microsoft apps that we use internally here in Brown Glock. Now, which is all well and good, but the problem is that you still need to set passwords for things like email clients because the user may not always be there when it's logging in. So actually, passwords are with us for a long time to come. So set strong passwords, don't reuse your passwords, and all the usual hygiene warnings apply. Finally then, let's just talk about one last thing. And this could be, well, scary or important or just how serious things have got. NATO, so that's a North Atlantic Treaty Organization for those that don't know about it, or OTAN if you speak French. But NATO have declared that cyber is now a domain. And what they mean by that is that very much as sea, air and land are, cyber is now a domain. And what that means in practical sense is if there's an attack in a particular domain against a NATO member, the other NATO members, right, could have what's called Article 5 triggered, in which case they have to then help defend and go on the assault of the attacker. So in other words, we've come one step closer towards formalised cyber warfare. And on that thought, I'm going to leave you in peace, and I wish you well with the rest of the week.